Zhang Henshui's Cause of Crying and Laughing Chapter 12. Biyi is envious of the orioles, but they return the pearl but benefit. She sacrifices her life to explore the tiger's den and sing the drum to show her power. But Fengxi was sleeping on the bed, thinking about her thoughts all night, when suddenly a sound came from midair, and she was suddenly startled. It turns out that there is a Buddhist temple not far from here. Every morning at dawn, the morning bell is rung. When Fengxi heard the sound of the bell, he felt that the whole night was upside down. I thought to myself, when I first met Uncle Fan, my heart was not so chaotic. What am I doing today? General Liu just gave me a little more money, but he is not as considerate as Uncle Fan when it comes to the word friendship. What did I look like when Uncle Fan recognized me that day? What does it look like now? At that time, there was no food to eat, so the whole family went to curry favor with others. Now I am still eating from others, and when I see others are richer than me, I don't want them. My conscience is too unjust. At this time, white slowly appeared on the window paper, and the room slowly became brighter. When I opened my eyes, I saw the portrait of the family tree hanging on the wall, smiling at people. Fengxi suddenly said to herself, "It's my fault." Aunt Shen also woke up, so she asked in the room over there, "Child, what are you shouting about? Are you talking in your sleep?" Fengxian's mother was asking. He simply remained silent, pretending to be talking in his sleep, and then calmed down all his thoughts. I slept until after 12 o'clock at noon and then woke up. After Fengxi got up, she didn't know why. It seemed that her spirit today was not as natural as before. Aunt Shen saw that no matter where she was sitting, she lowered her head and rubbed her handkerchief with both hands. The handkerchief was not at hand, so she went to roll up the corner of her clothes, and asked, "What's wrong with you? Don't tell me you caught a cold when you came back last night, right? I originally came back too late." Fengxi neither admitted nor denied what he said, and always sat silently. Sitting alone in the room, he was thinking of reading the letter from Jiashu under the quilt on the bedside, and then lifted the quilt. When I saw the roll of banknotes given by General Liu, I remembered that it was not safe to put the money under the quilt, so I counted some of the money, opened the small wooden box where I kept the odds and ends, and put the banknotes in. When closing the box, Shen Sangshuan was heard shouting all the way into the north room, saying that General Liu had sent someone to deliver something. Fengxi was startled when she heard this and held the lid of the small box, standing blankly. After a while, Aunt Shen brought in a blue velvet round box, opened the lid, held it with both hands, and brought it to Fengxi. She said, with a smile, "My child, look, these things are here again." Fengxi looked at it and just smiled. Aunt Shen said, "I heard that pearl agate is very valuable. This is probably worth dozens of dollars." Fengxi said, "Stop shouting quickly, let people hear it, and say that we have never seen the world." "Yeah, Sister Kin, it's not as good as this. It's worth more than 1,200. Of course this is more than that." After hearing this, Aunt Shen put the box on the small tea table, stepped back and sat on the bed. He was speechless for a long time and just looked at Fengxi's face. Fengxi smiled and said, "Do you think I have wronged you? I am telling the truth." Aunt Shen clapped her hands gently, and said, "I never expected that a stranger would give us such a heavy gift. How can this be so good?" At that time, Shen Sangshuan said, "Sister-in-law, the person who gave me the gift is waiting there. He asked us to give him a reply note. He also said, don't reward him with money. If he returns, General Liu will fire him from his job." Fengxi and Aunt Shen both laughed when they heard about it. So he took a small business card of Shen Fengxi and asked the visitor to take it back. At this time, General Liu was at Master Sheng's house again. The person who gave the gift took his business card and went to Sheng's house to reply. General Liu was sitting with Master Sheng in a private room, lying down and smoking a cigarette. A square stool was placed under the copper bed, and Mr. Sheng's little girl, Jin Qiwer, was lighting a cigarette and delivering it to both sides. General Liu was lying on 3 stacked duck-down square pillows, with his eyes and nose crooked to one side. He held the pipe in his mouth with both hands, facing the light as big as a bean in the cigarette tray in the middle of the bed, and swallowed hard. The drooping fan on the roof was blowing in the distant wind, slightly fluttering the silk trousers, but he ignored it, and the sound of the cigarette bubble on the lamp holder was whirring, which told him that he was in a trance while inhaling. At this time, the footman who had brought the gift came into the house to answer the question. When General Liu saw him, he rolled his eyes but was speechless. However, he raised a hand and struck the footman several times. He finished the cigarette in one breath, sat up with one end, and tightened his cigarette. "Don't open your mouth." Little Jin Choir quickly poured a cup of tea on the table next to her and handed it to General Liu with both hands. He took it, raised his head, drank with a loud sound, then blew out smoke and formed a ball in front of him, and then asked, "Have you accepted the thing?" The waiter said, "Yes." He asked the waiter to exit, then put the business card to his mouth with a smile and called out, "Little man." Master Sheng was taking the cigarette that Xiao Jin Cure had burned and was about to smoke it. When he saw him doing this, he put down his cigarette and called his name with a smile, "Brother Daju. Looking at you. You probably want to keep it for yourself. It's down. I finally found a suitable person for the commander. You want it again?" General Liu said with a smile, "Our uncle has many beauties. Why don't you wait a little longer for him?" He also sat up, patted General Liu on the shoulder, and said, "I have a master, not a girl, in a hotel. You can buy it with money." General Liu said, "What does it matter if you have a master?" Man said she hasn't gone out yet, but she's still the eldest daughter. Even if she falls in love with us men, will she not be able to get her? Guess what? At this point, he looked at little Jin Choir and turned to Master Sheng, said a few words. Master Sheng said, "Did this happen at noon last night? I can't believe it." General Liu said, "Don't you believe it? I will test it for you right away." Then he pressed the electric bell next to the bed. "Instruct the footman to drive his car to Miss Shen's house and tell him that General Liu is at Master Sheng's house and will pick up Miss Shen here to play cards." After hearing the news, the two guards escorting the car drove the car and sped to Shen's house. At this time, Feng Shi was sitting in the room worrying. She supported her head on the table with one hand, and just looked at the locust tree outside the glass window in a daze. On a horizontal branch, there were two little sparrows standing. One little sparrow stood still, and another little sparrow spread its little wings to the left and right of the sparrow, wagging its little tail, jumping around, mouthing. There was still a lot of chirping inside. Aunt Shen sat on a low stool, holding a poo fan, and waving it every now and then. She said softly, "This is totally weird. Why did he give you these things? Or we shouldn't be afraid." The money bit his hand. But do you know what he was thinking about? "I don't know what's going on. My heart is just beating today. I don't know if it's because I'm in love with the money or because I'm afraid of trouble." Touched his chest. Feng Shi said, "The more I think about it, the more scared I am. Can we forget the good things that Uncle Fan has done to us just by turning around?" Just as she said this, she heard someone in the yard shouting, "Miss Shen, is she at home?" When Feng Shi looked out the glass window, she saw her classmate Shuing Byron standing under the shade of the locust tree. She was wearing a crimson silk open-collared short-breasted jacket, and a long sapphire blue tie over the lapels. She had a large section of her arms bare, and her white breasts were exposed. She wore a sapphire blue skirt underneath, only 1 foot long, from top to bottom. Below, her whole round legs, covered with white stockings, are exposed. In her hands is a straw hat with a thin stem. Feng Shi smiled and said, "Hey, you are so naughty in your dress. Where can you go boxing?" As she said this, she walked out of the yard. Shuang Bayan smiled and said, "I know you have a good flute. Can you lend it to us today?" Feng Shi said, "Okay, let's talk for a while before we go. I'm so bored." Shuang Bayan laughed and said, "Don't be bored. You Miss Fan is coming soon. I can't sit down today. There's someone waiting outside the gate." Feng Shi smiled and said, "Is that you?" Shuang Byron smiled and bit him. Lower lip nodded. Feng Shi said, "It doesn't matter. You can also come and sit inside." Shuang Byron said, "We are going boating on the Beihai Sea, so I won't bother you here." Feng Shi nodded and left her alone, taking the Donggayo and making love. Give it to her, take her hand, and walk out the door. Sure enough, a young man in a suit was wandering at the door. When he saw Feng Shi, he nodded with a smile and left side by side with Shuang Byron. Shuang Byron was originally only 17 or 18 years old, and this young man in a suit was only 20 years old, so they were a perfect couple. She couldn't help but think in her heart, what a golden age for talented men and beautiful women. Speaking of Uncle Fan, he is not necessarily inferior to this young man. It's just that Miss Shuang is a young lady and I am an entertainer, but there is a huge difference. However, it can be seen from this that Uncle Fan treats me very well. Looking at the two of them, they stood still. The sound of car wheels shocked Feng Shi's consciousness. That car happened to be parked in front of her door, and Feng Shi quickly retreated into the house. After a while, I heard Aunt Shen yelling in, saying that General Liu had sent a car to pick her up and go to Master Shang's house to play small cards. Feng Shi frowned and said, "You want me to listen to a play today and play cards tomorrow? Are our statuses enough? I won't go." Aunt Shen said, What are you talking about? I'm Liu. The general is so polite to us. Do we have the nerve to reject him?" Feng Shi lifted the screen on the glass window and looked outside. When she saw that Shen Sangshuan was not in the yard, she turned around and said to Aunt Shen seriously, "Mom, I want to ask you something now. If you were a girl now and were looking for a son-in-law, would you be willing to be like the two young ladies and find someone with similar looks and get married? Or would you only care about money? Like Sister Yakin, are you going to marry a slutty old man?" Aunt Shen was stunned at first, and then said, "I understand what you said, but what you say about a division commander or a general is all yours." "I didn't say a word about it," Feng Shi said. "That's it. There's no need to say any nonsense. Please come and give me this bead circle and the money he gave me. Give it back to him. We are not here to be happy with the old man. If he has money, he can go somewhere else." With that, he hurriedly opened the box, took out the bead ring and the 300 yuan bill, and handed it to him. Aunt Shen. Seeing Feng Shi's resolute attitude, Aunt Shen said, "If you don't go, I won't go. How can he snatch you away? Why give these things back to him?" Feng Shi sneered. "Don't you want him to give them back? What are these things for us? If you don't want to take them away, didn't I just say that you are just greedy for money? Please send it back." Aunt Shen held the things in her hands, and couldn't help but plan them carefully. Especially the 300 yuan banknotes. I didn't know she had them in advance. It turned out that General Liu sent her home last night and gave her the money. No wonder she felt uneasy all night long. Yin nodded and said, "How can I not be happy to get rich? But this money is not easy to collect. Since you are unwilling to accept it, naturally your plan has been made. Then, I can't do anything wrong with you. I'll send it back to you. But don't let the drunkard know about it. I think he's having trouble with it." Feng Shi sneered. "You understand." Aunt Shen hesitated for a while, looked at the beads, then at the banknotes, sighed, and walked out to greet the person who came to pick her up. "Our girl is not feeling very well. I will go see your general in person to say thank you." The person who picked him up didn't know what was going on here. But now that he saw the owner of the house coming out, he didn't worry about not being able to make a deal, so he went with Aunt Shen. Feng Shi was very afraid that Shen Sangshuan would find out and come to pester her again, so she hid in the house and did not dare to go out. After a while, Shen Sangshuan was heard shouting in the yard, "Sister-in-law, I'm going out. Come and hold the door. Today, our eldest daughter may have to bring back a lot of money. You should give me some money to buy tomorrow. It's gone." After saying that, he left the long bookcase singing. Feng Shi closed the door and was wandering alone in the yard when she heard a woman's voice from the neighbor saying, "Oh, I was wrong in the past. I thought he was a current official, so I felt aggrieved and followed him. But he relies on his bad money and treats people like cattle. If I don't escape, my life will be lost." Another woman replied, "Yes, you are young. Why don't you want a world of flowers? Just look at the money. Didn't you hear that? The head of the house is a young man, and he is not feeling well after dinner. Sister, you are right." Feng Shi didn't expect that a good wind was blowing next door, but it brought such comforting words, and he naturally felt relaxed and happy. About an hour and a half later, Aunt Shen came back. This time, there was no escort, with the box cannon escorting the car. Aunt Shen hired a rickshaw to come back. Before waiting in the room, Feng Shi asked, "What did they say?" Aunt Shen said, "I am a timid official, and I dare not meet any general. I kept seeing Yakin, saying that I did not dare to accept such a heavy courtesy from others. Besides, your sister has a master, and she is not like before." As soon as I told her, she didn't understand anything. She stopped talking when I was there. General Liu invited her to talk in the front living room. When she came back, her face looked a little embarrassed at first, but then it became normal. I talked to her about some past things before coming back. Maybe they won't look for you in the future. Here we come. Feng Shi felt relieved and happy after hearing this. At night, I thought Shen Sangshuan would be instigated for a while when he found out, but unexpectedly, he just pretended not to know and didn't mention a word. On the third day, 2 policemen broke in to check the household registration. Shen Sangshuan rushed forward and said for a while that the report was a Dagu book. In addition to himself, he also had a niece, Feng Shi, who also did this. Feng Shi originally applied for her household registration as a scholar, but her uncle applied for a registered residence as a drum girl, which made her very unhappy. But he had already said it, and it was too late to take it back, so he had no choice but to let it go. Another day passed, and Shen Sangshuan didn't go out all day. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a patrolman led 3 people with box cannons and rushed in. He shouted first, "Is Shen Fengxi at home?" Fengxi thought to herself, who with such a big name calls people as soon as he walks in the door? Lifting the white gauze on the glass window and taking a look, I was startled. Why is this? At this time, Shen Sangshuan came forward and asked, "What do you want to see her for?" One of the guards said, "Your business has arrived. We have a party at the general's house today, so let Feng Shi go to one." Aunt Shen walked out of the room and said, "Boss, you are wrong. Feng Xi is my daughter. She used to sing drums, but now she is studying and becoming a student. How can I go out to attend a party?" A guard said, "Why are you so ignorant of praise? Our general thinks highly of you, so he asked you to go to the singing hall, but you turned the blame." The second guard asked, "Do you have time to tell them this?" "Beat." He only said the word beat and heard a bang, which shattered a piece of glass on the door. However, Shen Sangshuan did something evil. He begged for a while and persuaded the 4 people to sit in his room. Aunt Shen's face turned pale with fear, and she sat in the room silently. Feng Shi lay on the bed, wiping her tears with her handkerchief. Shen Sangshuan walked in with a policeman, and the policeman said, "Auntie, you girls are students now, and I know that. I see her walking over with her school bag at my post every day. But you guys, the household registration book says that you girls are being called in official terms. Besides," Mrs. Shen said angrily, "what else are you saying?" Shen Sangshuan said. He smiled at the patrolman and said, "Mister, please sit outside for a while I slowly talk to my sister-in-law." After saying that, he cupped his hands again, and the patrolman went out. Shen Sangshuan said to Aunt Shen, "Sister-in-law, what's the matter with you? Can we be as knowledgeable as them? If you say it, he really can shoot. A good man will not suffer the loss in front of him. Since they came with this tiger's momentum, they are willing to just go back empty-handed? I think since it's a party, it's not like going to Shanluzi Hall and letting the big girl come back early to get married. Who told us that we would do this in the future? Please, let's find a house and move as soon as possible. From now on, he won't be able to find us. If you are worried, I will go with the eldest girl. Besides, we girls are not alone in the meeting, and we can't go there alone. Go ahead. What's the big deal?" Aunt Shen was about to refute Sangshuan's words when she saw the 3 guards snatching them out of Sangshuan's room through the cracks in the bamboo curtain. One of them, holding the leather bag containing the cannon, stared into the room and shouted, "Who has the time to talk nonsense with you? Go, don't go. Just say, if you don't go, we will have ours. Plan." As he spoke, he unbuttoned the leather bag, as if to pull out the box of cannons. Aunt Shen said yo and ducked to the side, her face turning as white as paper. Shen Sangshuan waved his hands repeatedly and said, "It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter." After saying that, he walked to the yard again, smiled, and said with a smile, "3 bosses. Just wait a moment. She is already changing clothes. At most you have 10 minutes. Please have a cigarette." He took out a box of cigarettes, bowed, and handed one to each of them. Then he smiled and cupped his hands again. The 3 guards couldn't stand his appeal and went to his house again. When Shen Sangshuan lowered his head to his shoulders, showing a very troubled look, he walked into the room, frowned, and said to Aunt Shen, "Look at how embarrassed I am." He said in a low voice, "My sister-in-law, that gun is ruthless. If it is really fired, it will be troublesome." Aunt Shen has been carried by General Liu and Commander Shang in the past 2 days. She is no longer afraid of soldiers. Now let the box cannon. I was frightened, became frightened again, and couldn't say a word. Shen Sangshuan said, "Girl, look at how embarrassed your mother is. Please change your clothes and let me take you there." Feng Shi had cried for a while, and hid under the window for a while. She saw the guards walking around in the yard, their big riding boots clicking as they walked, but they didn't move. After hearing Sangshuan say that he would accompany her all the way, he became a little braver. He was about to go to the room outside to talk to his mother, but his feet felt like they were nailed to the ground, and he couldn't lift them up. After a pause, she walked out, holding onto the wall, only to see her mother holding each other with her arms, her whole body shaking like chaff. Fengxi slowly stroked her hair with both hands, looked at Aunt Shen and said, "Since I have to go, I will go. You can't eat me anyway." Shen Sangshuan clapped his hands and smiled and said, "This is not the case. Come on, big girl. I'll go with you to make sure you come back okay." Fengxi said, "We're just selling clothes. We're not running a clothing store. We're going to wear whatever you want." Just then, a soldier broke into the room and asked, "We have been making trouble for a long time. Why haven't you changed your clothes yet? We have orders from above. If the mission is not done well, if you can't pay the bills when you return, don't blame our brothers. We don't care about face anymore." Shen Sangshuan said, "Let's go now. Let's go." He dragged Aunt Shen off the chair with both hands and pushed her into the room. When they entered the house, the other two soldiers also entered the outside room. The mother and son did not dare to say anything. Fengxi wiped the tears on her face with a cold handkerchief, changed into a long coat, walked to the outside room, and whispered, "Let's go." The three soldiers looked at each other, smiled and walked out of the yard. Shen Sangshuan pretended to be a protector, followed Fengxi closely, got into the car together, and drove to General Liu's house. Along the way, Fengxi thought to herself that the so-called church meeting was probably unreliable. I am no longer a drummer, so why do I have to go? When we arrived at the door of General Liu's house, we saw a lot of cars parked there, as if they were inviting guests, so the meeting became a reality. After getting off the car, Sangshuan was gone, so he was guided by two guards to the front of a large living room. The curtain in front of the living room is hung high, and there are many people inside. Some were lying on rattan couches, some were sitting and talking, and some were reclining on soft chairs with their feet propped up high, smoking cigarettes. Look at the expressions, they are all grand. General Liu and Commander Shang were also there. When we met today, their faces were different from before. They looked at them without paying any attention. Outside the hall is a courtyard with a pergola, and 6 or 7 girls singing. Drums and books are sitting there facing the front living room. Fengxi also recognized 2 or 3 of them, so he had to go up to greet them and sit down together. Because there were soldiers with guns standing all around the courtyard, and the older girls were all very polite. Even when they coughed, they took out their handkerchiefs to cover their mouths. After sitting for a while, an armed horseman walked out of the living room, accompanied by guards. He placed the drum table in the middle of the pergola and asked several drummers to sing a song each. Then, the lights in the living room were turned on, and a banquet was being set in the middle for guests to take their seats. At this time, General Liu waved his hand outward and said, "It's the turn of the little girl named Shen to sing. Ask her to sing next to us." As he said this, he pointed to the ground beside the banquet to indicate that he wanted to sing. She was singing there, meaning. Ma Bian agreed and called Shen Sangshuan in from outside. Shen Sangshuan walked to the living room carrying the Sangxianzi, suddenly stood still, and bowed respectfully to the 3 guests at the banquet. Fengxi had reached this point and couldn't resist, so she lowered her head and walked into the living room. Shen Sangshuan had already borrowed a drumboard from someone else, and was then brought in by a guard. The place where it was placed was only 2 or 3 feet away from the banquet. When General Liu saw her coming in, he smiled and said, "Miss Shen, if you please, we won't be polite." When he said this, he used the chopsticks in his hand to draw a big circle in the air based on the table surface. Then he pointed his chopsticks at Fengxi and said with a smile, "Everyone, don't underestimate me. This is a female student. I want to promote her and make friends with her. She can use her status as a young lady and refuse to do so. Pay attention to me. But I have Zhang Tianxi's demon mirror, which showed her true appearance. I called to guards and brought her here today. I have to compare it with hers. See if we can make friends." When Shen Sangshuan heard this, he quickly put down his Sangxian, took a step forward, and said, with a smile on his face, "General, my niece, please calm down. She is a child, and is not sensible." She offended the general, and asked her to make amends to him. General Liu glared and said, "Who do you think you are? A portion?" As he spoke, he picked up a glass of wine and threw it on Shen Sangshuan's face. Shen Sangshuan hit such a big nail, stood up, and stepped aside. At this time, Master Shang had already stretched out his hand and shook it twice, and said with a smile, "Did you? Why are you doing this? You don't have to be as knowledgeable as them." Since he said, "Let Fengshi apologize to you, let's ask him, isn't this what kind of compensation do you want?" As he was talking, he glanced at Fengshi and saw that Fengshi was holding the drum stand with his face turned away, just raising his hand to wipe his eyes. Shen Sangshuan was as straight as a piece of wood. Of standing. Then he said, with a smile, "Don't you think it's important in your life to make people look like that?" When he said that, he waved his hand to Shen Sangshuan, and said with a smile, "Yes. You can sing a verse with her first. Sing well. When General Liu is happy, not only will he not punish you, but he will also reward you." Shen Sangshuan took this opportunity to say hello, then sat down and played the Sangxianzi. When Fengshi saw this situation, she knew she couldn't resist, so she wiped her eyes with her handkerchief, turned around, played the drum board, and sang Diyu Sad Autumn. When General Liu saw her pitiful appearance and singing such a sad and melodious song, his anger slowly dissipated. After Fengshi finished singing, everyone in the audience applauded. General Liu also smiled and ordered Ma Bian, "Pour a cup of tea for this girl to drink." Master Shang then smiled at Fengshi and said, "How about it? I said General Liu will naturally get better, right? You kid. You really don't know how to coax people." As soon as he said this, everyone burst into laughter. Fengshi thought to herself, "What you said is clearly an insult to me. Why should I coax someone named Liu?" He was feeling angry, so he touched his hand. When he saw it, a tall man in armor came to him with a cup of tea. Fengshi was taken aback, then she said, "Excuse me," with a forced smile, and took the teacup. General Liu said, "Fengshi, you sang well, but the song you just sang was obviously too sad. Let's sing a song to entertain the children." Mr. Shang said, "Then, let's sing The Movie Visits the Temple Bar, a Taya doll." After saying this, everyone looked at Fengshi and smiled. It turns out that it was a custom in old Beijing that any woman who couldn't get a son, or whose daughter was old and couldn't find her mother-in-law's house, would go to Dongyu Temple to tie up her doll. The way to tie the doll is to hide a thin rope on the body and secretly tie the clay-shaped child in front of the empress. This big drum word for tying dolls describes a story about a woman going to the temple to tie a doll. It is certainly a very interesting thing to come from the mouth of a young girl. And to sing this kind of music, you not only need to be articulate, but you also need to always have a bit of a naughty look on your face to be in tune. If you sing with a straight face, it will be meaningless. Fengshi didn't expect that they would like this kind of music. Just when she was about to say no, Shen Sangshuan smiled at her and said, "Girl, you can sing for me." General Liu said, "That won't work. You can sing for me." "No, you have to sing." "Well, if you don't sing well, sing it again. If you sing badly again, you have to sing it 3 times. You can't finish it unless you sing." Well, laughing, I wish I could crawl into every crack in the ground. I turned around and thought, since I could let them go after singing well, it would be better to coax them a little and get out as soon as possible. As soon as his mind changed, he immediately started singing with a smile. The people at the table were no longer as interested in listening as they used to be. They would cheer for a while after listening to a piece, and cheer for a while after hearing a piece. After Fengshi finished singing this section, everyone praised her. Someone said, "We are all gunmen, and we must negotiate strict rewards and punishments." She offended General Liu first, so he punished her to sing, and now she sings very well. She should be rewarded with some benefits. General Liu twisted the tip of his short beard on his upper lip with 2 fingers and smiled. Yin said, "It's not easy to reward this girl. I gave her thousands of dollars in gifts, but she returned them to me. What else can I reward?" Master Shang said, with a smile, "Don't just talk about money. You have to talk humanly. Miss Shen only talks about love and justice. She doesn't care about money." General Liu said with a smile, "Really? Then let you come and sit down, and we will pay friends." He waved to Fengshi first, then turned his head back, glared at Ma Bian and shouted, "Bring me a chair and a seat." Look at those Ma Bian, they are all armed. They look so arrogant, but after General Liu gave them a drink, they behaved as if they were tame sheep, and there was no snoring of mosquitoes. So he placed a square stool next to General Liu. Fengshi thought about it, Those warriors were so afraid of him. How could she, a delicate girl, dare to resist him? He had no choice but to boldly say, "I'll just stay with you. I don't dare to take this seriously." General Liu said, "Since we asked you to sit down, just sit down. If you don't sit down, you will look down on me." The division commander stood up and came over, dragged her hand to General Liu, pushed her down, and pushed Feng Shi to sit down on the stool. At this time, cups and chopsticks were placed on the table, and someone poured a full glass of wine for her. General Liu held up the cup and smiled at her. "Drink." Feng Shi had no choice but to smell the cup, and then smiled and said, "I'm sorry. I don't know how to drink." When General Liu heard what she said, he said reluctantly. After pausing for a while, she said with a straight face, "You still don't want to give me face?" Feng Shi looked back and saw that Shen Sangshuan had left. She was the only one left here. She immediately changed her mind and said with a smile, "I don't know how to drink, but I must drink this first glass of wine." He picked up the glass, tilted his neck, and drank it all. After finishing the drink, he took a shot at the crowd. Putting down the cup, he immediately took the wine bottle from the table next to the table, and poured a glass of wine. Every time someone pours a drink, ask for your name and say a few polite words. These people all smiled, picked up their cups, and drank them all in one gulp. At the end, he was in front of General Liu. Feng Shi smiled and said to him, "General Liu, please finish the cup first." When he was done, he stretched out his cup to receive Feng Shi's wine. Feng Shi poured the wine, glanced at him, and said with a low smile, "General, are you still angry with my child?" General Liu drank the cup with a squeak, and couldn't hold it in, and laughed loudly. He smiled, and said, "Do I deserve to be angry with you? Come, let's all have some fun." Then he waved to the outside of the living room and said to Ma Bian, "Call them all in." Ma Bian understood and put a group of drummers downstairs. "Mom, we called in together." General Liu said to all the guests, "Don't look at me enjoying myself alone. Let's all have a good time." As he spoke, the guests like bees out of a cage, each pulled a drummer and laughed wildly for a while, and the banquet was dispersed. If they met someone they liked, they would sit together, and if they didn't like someone, they would go to another couple to make jokes. Here, General Liu took Feng Shi's hand and sat on a sofa on the side, saying with a smile, "Look at how they have fun." That evening, we parted ways, and everything was fine. "Why did you return all my gifts the next day?" Feng Shi was held by his hand. She wanted to break free, but she didn't dare to break free. She could only smile and say, "How dare I accept such a heavy gift from the general for no reason?" When he said that, he smeared his feet on the ground, which meant, "I hate you. I hate you." General Liu smiled and said, "Although you said it was for no reason, the gift I gave you was for a reason. You are very smart. Don't you understand?" He said, stroking Feng Shi's arm with one hand, and then slowly stretched it upwards. Feng Shi suddenly stood up, retracted her hand, and smiled. "My mother is very worried about me. I'm asking for leave from you, General Liu also stood up, waved his hands, and said, "Don't be busy. I still have a lot to say to you." Feng Shi smiled and said, "It's not busy even if I have something to say. Let me say it next time." General Liu looked at her for a long time without saying anything. Shrugging his shoulders, he sneered and ordered Shen Sangshuan to be called. Shen Sangshuan was called inside by the horseman, and he didn't dare to come forward, so he just stood far away with his hands hanging down. General Liu said, "I'm telling you, I called you here today to vent my anger, but I'm a soft-hearted person. Your niece kept apologizing to me, so I can't hold it against you. Go back and tell her that I haven't married yet. My concubine is almost the same as my wife. As long as you are sensible, I may not remarry. I'm Liu, and I've never let anyone down in my life. Call your sister-in-law here, and I'll give her a few thousand yuan to live on. You understand? Don't be ungrateful." General Liu became more and more fierce. At the end, he glared and shouted, "Go. If she doesn't go back, I'll stay." After hearing this, Feng Shi felt anxious and dizzy, and then fell on the sofa and fainted. I'll tell you next time if she lives or dies. Alright, this part of the story ends here.
Want to know what happened next? Let's listen to the breakdown next time.